Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, A Monk in Cloud. In this video, let us break down the RESTful web service architecture. And if you want to read what I'm going to explain today, I've also written a blog and I've provided the link to the blog in the description box below. Go ahead and check that out. Now let's get started. A REST or RESTful web service offers better performance due to its lightweight architecture. It allows different messaging formats such as JSON, plain text, HTML, and XML compared to SOAP, which only allows XML. REST is an architecture style that defines the standard for loosely coupled applications designed using the HTTP protocol for data transmission. Now, what is this JSON, right? So JavaScript object notation is a more accessible format for data exchange in REST architecture. JSON is also lightweight and language independent. It contains a simple key value pair that makes it compatible with data structure defined in most programming languages. RESTful web services, also known as REST web services, establish a framework with specific rules to design web services. They are aimed at ensuring compatibility between various computer systems connected through the internet. With RESTful web services, systems can communicate by accessing and modifying text-based data on the web using a consistent and predefined set of operations that don't rely on past interactions or states. So here are some fundamental principles of RESTful web service architecture, along with an illustration of the principles of a RESTful web service architecture using the example of an e-com website, right? So firstly, let's consider the first key principle would be stateless. So every request from a client to a server must contain all the information that server needs to understand and process. Every request made by client includes all the necessary information to fulfill that request, and there is no need to maintain any session related information on the server. Instead, it is entirely managed on the client side. So let's take an example of e-com website, right? So each request from client, like viewing a product or adding into the cart, must contain all information required for processing it. So if a user wants to view their cart, the request must include the user ID or any other relevant details so server can identify and respond with appropriate cart details. So if you can see on screen, so /API/cart is post request. So here, when a user adds a product into their cart, the request must include the product ID, quantity, and the user ID. Those are provided here, right? So this is what when I say stateless. Next, let's talk about client server architecture. In this design, there are two distinct parts, the client and the server, which communicates with each other through a network. And the client is responsible for managing the user interface and interacting with the user. And in the same way, server is responsible for the backend and data processing. So they can evolve separately without affecting each other. The client, which can be your browser or the application, manages user interactions like selecting products, while the server handles data retrieval, cart management, and checkout processing, etc. So they interact through something called as HTTP, request and response. Next, we have uniform interface, which supports CURD with HTTP methods. So it is a consistent interface, simplifies the interaction. Basically, let's consider the same example of e-com, right? So if you want to view a product, you need to make a GET request on the endpoint like /API/products. And if you want to add something into the cart, you need to make a POST request, which contains all the necessary information to the another endpoint called /API/cart. Similarly, if you want to put something into a cart or if you want to add something into a cart, you can use product ID. As I told, product ID is required, and you should also pass on all the necessary details when you are making this call. And if you want to remove or delete a request, then you will call the same endpoint, right, with the product ID, and you will have something called as delete or in the endpoint. So this is just an example that you are seeing on the screen. Similarly, you will have more and more capabilities using this RESTful based architecture. So by adhering to these standard methods, API provides a consistent way for developers to interact with web services. So it enables them to perform basic operations on resources without needing to understand the underlying implementation details. So if that is being cleared, let's check out what is resource based, another principle of RESTful architecture. So in REST, everything is considered a resource, and a specific URL can be accessed using to each resource as well. Resources are the key abstractions in REST. That is very, very important. And a resource can represent a single object or a collection of objects as well. Resources like products, users, orders, and cart items are all identified by URLs. For example, if you want to consider Amazon as an example, a specific product could be accessed at www.amazon.com/products/ with product ID. If you have a specific product ID, you can mention that. And in the similar way, there are a couple of more examples like get request on a product ID, and a user to get orders of a specific user, you can add the user ID as well. Also, these are small examples that I've given you. Next, another important key aspect or the principle of the RESTful architecture is representation of resources. So resources can have different representations such as JSON, XML, HTML, etc. Clients interact with resources by obtaining representations of them and manipulating these representations. When a client sold a representation of a resource, it has enough information to modify the resource on the server. The same product resource might be rendered differently for a different web browser on a mobile application as well. That is clear. Next, let's check out layered system. So the architecture allows for an intermediate layer such as a load balancer or a cache layer. You can introduce that without affecting how client interacts with the server. So each layer can provide a specific set of functionalities, improving the scalability and maintainability of the entire system. E-com website can have various layers like load balancer, caching layers, or authentication layers as well. So this client does not need to know about these layers. A request to view a product might pass through a cache layer to improve the response time without the client's awareness itself. The last one is code on demand. Servers can provide executable code to the client to be executed in the client's context. So this allows for part of application logic to be shifted to the client as well. An e-com website should send JavaScript code to the client's browser to execute certain functionalities like client-side validation or enhance interactivity within the user's browsing experience, etc. So the RESTful architecture style uses a standard HTTP methods, and by adhering to this principle, RESTful web services aim to be simple, scalable, and maintainable. So many modern web APIs are developed following the RESTful principles using standard conventions to perform CURD operations on resources. Now, in the coming videos, I'll talk more about these applications as well. If you can see, a RESTful API reference architecture for e-com looks like this. You will have your front-end client, which is built on top of React, Angular, or Vue. It can be any other programming languages as well. Then it will interact with API gateway, for example, login through authentication, rate limiting, etc. Next, it will call the REST API server in the backend. It can be on Node.js, Spring Boot, or Django REST APIs as well. And that's where the business logic gets executed, where you will have your service layer. And then it will call the database, which is a MySQL or MongoDB or DynamoDB, anything that works for you. So this is how exactly the REST API works. And these 7 components or the principles that I talked about are really, really important in understanding RESTful web service architecture. And I've tried to make it simple with taking the example of e-com website. So if you're liking the content that I'm creating, please consider subscribing and share it with your friends. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one with another concept of system design. Until then, bye.